Chapter 1. The Eyes Before the Words. Before a man speaks, he moves. Before she confesses, her breath will shift. Before truth escapes the mouth, the body has already whispered it. In a world saturated with words, polished, practiced, performed, what if the truth lies not in what is said, but in what is shown? There is a language older than ink and parchment, deeper than dialect, immune to rehearsals. A language carved into the sinews of survival, forged in the fire of instinct. It is the flicker of the eye before a lie, the tightening of the jaw before betrayal, the lean of the torso when attraction has no voice. The body, my friend, is the original confessor. It never learned to lie as well as the tongue. You've seen it before, though you may not have had the words to name it. The handshake that lingered a second too long. The smile that never reached the eyes. The foot pointed toward the door in a meeting full of false agreements. We feel it. We know it. But we rarely trust ourselves to call it. This chapter, this journey begins not with decoding others, but with reawakening the primal literacy within you. Look at the world not as a parade of words, but as a living theater of microsignals. And know this, what they say is the disguise. What they do is the confession. Centuries before there was psychology, there was awareness. Before the textbooks, before the studies, there was Da Vinci sketching sinews and smiles, decoding anatomy like scripture. Before the professors, there was Lincoln, watching the rooms of rivals not just with ears, but with instinct sharpened by hardship. Before there were courses on confidence, there was Carnegie walking into steel rooms, reading every brow wrinkle like a battlefield general surveying terrain. You don't need more information. You need attunement. And to attune, you must first strip away the noise. We are born knowing this language. Infants mirror faces. Children sense unease before it is spoken. But the adult learns to dull the signal, to believe only in the audible and the logical. You are here now, not to learn a new language, but to unforget the one your blood already speaks. There's a war going on every day. Not in the streets, not on the screens, but in boardrooms, coffee shops, train stations, elevators, courtrooms, and churches. It's a silent war for truth, for trust, for power. And most will walk through it blind, because they never learn to see the lean behind the smile, the eyes that dart down when courage fails, the way fear folds the shoulders like a collapsing bridge. Power doesn't shout. It moves. It claims space. It slows time. It speaks in silence, not in sound. The alpha lion doesn't roar in every moment. It stares, holds ground, and lets the jungle move around it. The real decoders of body language are not talkers. They are watchers. They understand that the body is not random, it is a billboard. Every motion is an advertisement of the inner state. But to read it, you must quiet your own. Still the chatter. Slow the impulse to respond. Let observation become your new weapon. The man fidgeting with his ring? He's hiding conflict. The woman with a frozen smile and a rigid neck? Her mask is cracking. The friend whose feet shift away while speaking? Part of them wants to leave that moment. And once you see, you can never unsee. Let's speak of intention. Nothing in the body is without it. The great inventor Edison didn't just hear what people told him, he watched. He knew that what people asked for wasn't always what they needed. And in that awareness, he built what no one else dared to believe. He decoded what people meant, even when they didn't know themselves. The body speaks even when the mind doesn't know the message. That's the mastery of this journey, not just seeing the lies of others, but learning how your own body has betrayed your truth. When you sit small, your goals shrink. When your shoulders curl, your confidence drains. When you avoid eye contact with the mirror, your dreams know you've abandoned them. Reclaim your posture, and you reclaim your presence. Hold eye contact with life itself, and it begins to respond. This is not about manipulation. This is about awakening. Because once you see that the language of the body is the truest form of communication, you will stop listening to what people say and start listening to what they are. There is a rhythm to honesty, and the body dances to it even when the voice is offbeat. Clarity is not found in statements. It is found in stillness, in congruence, in the alignment between word and movement. A man says, "I'm confident," while his foot taps like a metronome of anxiety. She says, "I'm fine," with arms wrapped tightly around a chest in self-protection. Do you hear it now? Do you see the fracture between mouth and motion? To the untrained, these are quirks. To the awakened, these are windows into the soul. The great leaders of history didn't just speak well, they observed relentlessly. Martin Luther King Jr., in his stillness, exuded command. His words burned, but his presence carried fire long before the syllables struck the air. Walt Disney didn't just dream, he watched people dream. He noticed what made eyes widen, when spines leaned forward, when wonder moved the breath without permission. Observation was his superpower, and it can be yours. But understand this, body language is not a trick. It is not a party game or a business hack. It is a philosophy of awareness. It is about seeing what others miss, and hearing what was never spoken. To see clearly, you must become the mirror. Not the judge, not the actor. The mirror, flawless, still, reflecting reality without distortion. That is how you win rooms. That is how you earn trust before a single word. Because when you truly see people, not just hear them, they feel it. And in a world starving to be seen, that becomes power beyond measure. You may be wondering, where does it begin? What's the first movement to watch, the first cue to catch? It begins in the eyes. The one place the body still struggles to lie. The eyes reveal attention, truth, desire, and fear. They dilate with passion, dart with guilt, drop with shame, widen with surprise. They are the windows not just to the soul, but to the moment of truth. A person may learn to fake a smile, but they cannot fake the congruence of the gaze. Watch where the eyes go when a question is asked. Do they flick left, digging into memory? Or right, manufacturing fantasy? Do they drop, unable to meet the weight of truth? Or lock onto yours, holding ground like a storm held in place? Do not just hear a person, witness them. The truth is not in their tone. It is in their gaze, in the tension of their hands, in the rhythm of their breath when silence wraps the room. And once you learn to read that truth, you are no longer in the conversation. You are commanding it. So let this be the first vow on this journey. From this moment on, you will never walk blind again. Not in meetings. Not in negotiations. Not in love. Not in war. You will watch with the quiet mind of a hawk. You will listen with your eyes before your ears. And when you speak, it will not be to fill the air, but to carve reality. This world is filled with noise. But the few who learn to see the signal underneath it, those are the ones who shape destiny. You are not here to play the game. You are here to read the players. And then, to master the board. Welcome to the decoding. Chapter 1 has just opened your eyes. Chapter 2, Mindset, the Hidden Interpreter. They say seeing is believing, but that is the first deception. Because you do not see with your eyes alone, you see with your mindset. What you perceive, what you decode, what you interpret in the silent theater of body language is not just a reflection of the world. It is a mirror held up to the beliefs you carry into it. If your mind is wired to see threats, you will find tension in every twitch. If your mind is chained to doubt, you will miss the cues of admiration and invitation. Mindset is not just the lens through which we read others. It is the architect of what we allow ourselves to see. A man can walk into a room and notice nothing but shadows, missed glances, crossed arms, slouched shoulders, and he will think the world is cold, distant, unwelcoming. Another man, trained in awareness and certainty, walks into the same room, sees the exact same cues, and interprets them not as rejection, but as opportunity to engage, to reveal, to command presence without demanding it. The difference is not in what they saw, it is in what they brought to the moment. This is the truth most never understand. Your ability to read others is dictated first by the clarity with which you read yourself. Do you carry a mindset of fear, of scarcity, of unworthiness? If so, everybody around you becomes a potential source of judgment. But if you carry a mindset shaped by presence, power, and purpose, then you do not shrink when you observe tension in others. You understand it, you contextualize it, you even use it. The master decoder does not let body language dictate their confidence. They use confidence to illuminate body language. When Henry Ford looked into the eyes of doubters and investors and skeptics, he didn't just see resistance, he saw misalignment of vision. He didn't recoil at crossed arms or dismissive smirks. He understood the language of disbelief not as an obstacle but as a call to lead more clearly. And when Carnegie stood before industrialists too proud to listen, he knew that persuasion didn't start in speech, it started in stance. In belief. In certainty. The kind that infects a room before a single syllable is spoken. And you can only radiate that kind of energy if your mindset has been forged in something deeper than external validation. It must be rooted in the unshakable belief that you have already earned the right to observe, to interpret, and to act. Think of it like this. Every room you walk into is not a performance stage. It is a current of energy, and your mindset is the switch that determines whether you are a conductor or a spectator. If your thoughts are locked in anxiety, your focus becomes narrow, reactive, easily deceived by surface cues. You become a slave to the most obvious gestures, missing the truth lying just beneath them. But when your mind is steady, trained, clear, aware, you begin to see beyond the noise. You see the rhythm in the chaos. You recognize that crossed arms are not always defensive, they can be contemplative. That a smile isn't always friendly, it can be political. That silence isn't absence, it's sometimes strategy. The mind, once elevated, stops taking signs at face value and begins decoding the context behind the cue. But here's what most people never confront. Their own body is constantly revealing the nature of their mindset to the world. Walk into a room with shallow breath, lowered shoulders, scanning eyes, and restless fingers, and you are broadcasting anxiety, whether you speak or not. Enter with grounded feet, an unhurried gaze, a spine that knows its place in the world, and even your stillness becomes a language of command. Your body does not lie about your mindset. So before you begin decoding others, you must master the signal you send. Do not misunderstand this. This is not about arrogance, nor about playing God over conversations. This is about responsibility. Because to read others with integrity, you must first cleanse the mirror of your perception. The man who sees envy in every smile is telling you more about his own wounds than about the world. The woman who assumes every silence is rejection is exposing not insight, but unhealed stories. You must clear the lens. You must become still enough, aware enough, disciplined enough that when you watch someone shift in their seat, or glance to the side, or blink too rapidly, you can separate signal from static. This is emotional intelligence sharpened to a blade's edge. This is psychology through the eyes of the warrior poet. And it begins not with a technique or a gesture. It begins with you. You cannot decode what you fear. You cannot observe what you resent. You cannot interpret what you envy. These emotions twist the lens, bend the truth, cloud the signals. So your first discipline is not learning what every gesture means, but unlearning the beliefs that keep you blind to what they could mean. A sharpened mindset allows you to walk into negotiation and feel, not guess, feel, that the opposing party's confidence is brittle. It lets you sense when someone's defiance is a mask for insecurity, when their laughter is a shield for grief, when their stillness is not confidence, but retreat. And once you can feel this, once your perception is no longer dulled by judgment, then your power becomes not reaction, but choice. The power to know when to speak and when to wait. The power to lean in when others withdraw. The power to ask the question that no one else saw coming, because you saw the breath catch in their throat before they even knew they were afraid. This is what mindset gives you, not just the tools of observation, but the clarity to interpret what matters. Imagine walking through life no longer needing to be told what's happening, because you can see it unfolding in the architecture of posture, in the choreography of subtle shifts, in the symphony of body rhythm and silence. Imagine listening to someone tell you they're fine, and your mindset is steady enough to see the tremble in their jaw, the subtle tilt of the head that betrays the lie, and you don't call it out to win, but you use that knowledge to lead, to serve, to navigate with wisdom, not ego. This is the power Lincoln used. Not brute force, but a refined presence that noticed when a man was ready to listen before he opened his mouth. This is the clarity Disney brought when he stood in a room full of suits and could tell, from the way their shoulders leaned back and eyes narrowed, who believed in magic and who had already sold their imagination for a paycheck. This is the power of mindset forged in steel, not just to see, but to know what you're looking at. You are not here to become a machine of analysis. You are here to become a living compass, so finely tuned, so grounded in awareness, that your presence alone begins to shift the energy in every interaction. People will begin adjusting themselves not even knowing why, because your mindset emits a gravity that draws truth from those around you. So the next time you step into a room, do not just ask, "What are they showing me?" Ask instead, "What is my mind ready to receive?" Because that answer will determine what you see, how you respond, and what kind of reality you shape with your presence. This is not the game most are playing. This is not charm. This is not confidence. This is command. Not over others, but over your own awareness. And that is the foundation of every master decoder. Chapter 3: Belief, the engine behind perception. Before you can understand the body in front of you, you must confront the belief system behind your own eyes, because every interpretation, every analysis, every instinctual conclusion you draw when decoding human behavior is built not upon what the other person is doing, but on what you believe to be true about people, about yourself, and about the world. Belief is not a passive idea floating in your head. It is the hidden operator behind every glance you give, every conclusion you reach, every word you trust or reject, and if your belief system is cracked, poisoned, or undeveloped, then you could stare directly into the truth and still not recognize it. This is why two people can watch the same person speak, see the same posture, the same gestures, the same expression, and walk away with radically different interpretations, because what they are perceiving is not just raw behavior but a filtered reality, and that filter is belief, and belief is the most powerful lens a human being can wear. The man who believes that people are always out to manipulate him will read caution where there is care, suspicion where there is nervousness, and aggression where there is simply assertion. The woman who believes she is not worthy of love will see rejection in neutrality, competition in kindness, and danger in intimacy. The body doesn't lie, but the viewer might, and if your belief is corrupted, then you are not reading the world, you are reading your wounds. It is a terrifying thing to accept that the majority of your interactions may have been misinterpreted because you were watching through the eyes of fear, resentment, scarcity, or arrogance. But it is also the first liberation, because once you take ownership of that filter, you can begin to clean it, to clarify it, to strengthen it, and when your beliefs become aligned with clarity, courage, and growth, your interpretations of others become exponentially more accurate. It is not that you suddenly have superhuman intuition, it is that you finally stopped getting in your own way. This is the reason Edison could look at failure after failure, not as a sign of futility, but as feedback. His belief wasn't just in the eventual success of his invention, it was in the nature of progress itself. And because he believed that every mistake was a clue rather than a curse, he could interpret obstacles as data, not as insults. He read rejection not as condemnation, but as calibration. Now apply that to body language. If your belief system tells you that discomfort is dangerous, then you will run from every crossed arm and every furrowed brow. But if your belief tells you that tension is often a precursor to transformation, then you will lean in when others back off, and that moment of tension might become the gateway to truth. That difference, between retreat and recognition, is not about skill. It's about belief. Your beliefs are not private. They are not hidden. They are not invisible. They radiate from you like heat from a flame. You carry them into every room. They shape your tone, your posture, your eye contact, your timing, your patience. People respond not to the words you use, but to the conviction behind those words, and conviction is belief made visible. A man who speaks without belief is ignored, even if his message is perfect. A woman who moves without belief is doubted, even if her logic is flawless. But belief, pure, unwavering belief, is magnetic, and when you possess it, people will feel it before they understand it. It bypasses their skepticism and lands in their gut. It is the invisible handshake that precedes every deal, every relationship, every act of trust. So ask yourself, what do I believe about people? Do I believe they are hiding from me, or waiting to be seen? Do I believe that tension in a conversation is a threat or an invitation to go deeper? Do I believe that I am capable of decoding truth, or am I always second-guessing my own perception? Your answers to those questions will determine your ceiling, not just in reading body language, but in leading people, inspiring change, building trust, and living with power. And make no mistake, this is about power. Not domination, not control, but the power to understand, the power to walk into a room and know what is happening beneath the surface because you are no longer blinded by fear or bias. That is the kind of power Carnegie wielded when he turned hesitant partners into committed allies, not by force, but by belief that people are capable of rising if you treat them like they already have. And let's talk about how belief affects the way your own body speaks. Because you cannot fake belief in your movements, not for long. The body always leaks the truth. A speaker who does not believe in what they say may memorize every line, rehearse every gesture, but their eyes will give them away. Their breathing will betray the performance. Their shoulders will round inward as if trying to shield them from their own voice. But a person with unshakable belief can speak imperfectly and still mesmerize, because their body becomes an extension of their inner certainty. Their hands move with clarity. Their tone resonates with authority. Their stillness becomes more powerful than noise. They do not convince with logic, they persuade with presence. Belief is what allows you to hold eye contact without flinching. It's what allows you to remain still in the face of interrogation. It's what keeps your voice steady when the room tries to shake you. And here is the paradox. To read others with truth, you must first believe in your own. If you doubt yourself every time you feel an intuition, you will hesitate, and in that hesitation, the moment will pass. But if you have built belief through discipline, through study, through repetition, through earned confidence, then you will act not from impulse, but from informed instinct, and that is where mastery begins. You see, belief doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. True belief is quiet, grounded, and relentless. It is the steel beneath the velvet. It is the spine that doesn't bend when tested. And people notice it. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. They adjust to it. They respect it. And they remember it. That is why some people seem to just get what they want, not because they manipulate, but because their belief carries such weight that others begin to trust their judgment before understanding the reasoning. So if you want to become a master of reading others, you must first become a master of your own belief system. Tear it apart. Examine it. Challenge it. Strengthen it. Build it not on wishful thinking, but on chosen truths, beliefs that serve your vision, your purpose, your values. And then watch how the fog lifts. Watch how you begin to see not just gestures, but motives. Not just expressions, but patterns. Not just people, but the hidden stories written into their every move. This is where the real decoding begins, not with the body in front of you, but with the mind inside you. You want to understand others? Then believe in your own capacity to see. Believe that presence is more powerful than pretense. Believe that truth is always visible if you have the eyes to find it. Because once belief anchors your vision, you will begin to see what others miss. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Chapter 4. Clarity, the weapon of the calm mind. There is a moment just before a decision when the world slows down, not for everyone, but only for those who have learned to silence the chaos within long enough to hear the truth surface, like a whisper rising through still water. And this moment, this fraction of awareness between reaction and intention, is where clarity lives, and it is here, not in noise or emotion or performance, that the true decoder of body language sharpens their edge, because in a world obsessed with reacting, with impressing, with interpreting everything in real time, the one who waits, who breathes, who sees without flinching becomes not just a better observer but a different class of human being entirely. Clarity is not the absence of confusion, it is the conquest of it, and it is earned, not given. Clarity comes when you stop needing people to behave a certain way for your comfort, when you stop demanding that every interaction validates your insecurity, when you stop looking for agreement and start looking for truth, and the truth is never as loud as you want it to be. It does not wave flags or scream in capital letters. It sits quietly in the tilt of a head, in the pause before a handshake. The delay between a question and a breath. And if you are not clear enough within yourself to notice that pause, you will miss the entire message. People speak constantly with their bodies, but their message is encrypted, and you cannot decode the encryption with a mind polluted by impatience, assumption, or desperation, because every assumption you carry into a conversation blinds you to a subtle truth trying to emerge. If you assume someone is your enemy, every glance becomes a glare, every silence becomes a threat, every shift in posture becomes a signal of attack. But if you walk in with clarity, if you have already cleared your mind of emotional noise and sharpened it like a blade, then each gesture becomes information, each micro-expression becomes data, and the person in front of you stops being a mystery and starts becoming a map. Clarity doesn't mean you're never wrong. It means your margin of error collapses, because you are no longer layering fiction over fact, and that is how the great minds of history saw things the average person missed. Lincoln didn't need applause to know where a nation's soul was breaking. He could read it in the absence of noise, in the way men sat, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the stillness of a crowd too wounded to cheer. For didn't need investors to believe in him. He read the fear in their restraint and still moved forward, because clarity is not consensus, it is vision untangled from fear, and that is what gives your interpretation of body language real meaning. There's something else clarity gives you. It gives you the courage to do nothing when others panic, to hold your gaze when others look away, to choose your response instead of flinching into defense, and this discipline of stillness, of observation without reaction, is the rarest form of power in modern life, because we are conditioned to fill silence, to answer quickly, to prove ourselves through speed, but the master of body language understands that silence is a canvas, and the way people respond to it reveals far more than what they say under pressure. Clarity also means seeing people not as categories or roles, boss, enemy, friend, stranger, but as dynamic beings, shaped by 1,000 unseen forces, and when you stop labeling and start witnessing, you'll begin to notice the difference between defensive confidence and rooted confidence, between a smile meant to manipulate and a smile born from peace, between gestures rehearsed and gestures that emerge involuntarily. And this kind of awareness doesn't come from cleverness, it comes from the absence of internal noise. It means your mind is no longer running a background process of proving, defending, impressing, or comparing, and that, more than any single technique or strategy, is what separates the master decoder from the amateur observer. The clarity to be fully present with the signals in front of you, not chasing meaning but letting it reveal itself through time and attention. Because the truth about people is not hidden behind complexity, it is hidden behind your own impatience. And if you want proof, look at the moments in your life where someone misunderstood you, not because you lied, but because they never stopped long enough to listen fully, to watch your body, to feel your energy, to interpret your meaning beyond the words you chose, and now recognize that this is exactly what most people are doing to everyone, all the time. Rushing, assuming, reacting, misinterpreting, and projecting their internal chaos onto neutral behavior. That's why clarity isn't optional. It's a prerequisite for decoding, for leading, for knowing when to act and when to stay still, when to speak and when to let your silence make the point for you. And if your mind is clouded by doubt, resentment, or ego, your ability to read others will be no better than a tourist trying to decipher ancient script without the cultural keys. It will be noise interpreting noise. Clarity is cultivated. You build it through solitude, through conscious detachment from your emotional storms, through discipline in observation, through asking better questions not of others, but of yourself. What am I assuming? What am I afraid to see? What am I projecting into this moment that isn't actually here? And if you answer those honestly, you will begin to feel something shift, not just in how you read others, but in how they start responding to you, because people can feel when they are truly being seen, not filtered through judgment or need, but seen with clarity, and that kind of presence commands attention without volume. The world is filled with people who want to influence others, but the ones who actually succeed are the ones who understand them, and that understanding is born from clarity, not charisma. So if you want to walk into any room and read it like an open book, if you want to understand what others are actually saying beneath their scripts, beneath their smiles, beneath their defenses, then do not begin with better questions or clever tricks or advanced behavioral models. Begin by clearing the fog inside your own mind, because a clear mind does not search, it sees. And when you see clearly, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase power. You become it. Chapter 5. Vision, the architecture of perception. There is a difference between seeing and having a vision, a profound and often overlooked distinction, because while seeing is passive, reactive, subject to the momentary fluctuations of light, sound, emotion, and circumstance, vision is deliberate, structured, directed from the inside out, and it serves as the silent blueprint that determines how you interpret the world and how the world, in turn, responds to your presence. Because whether you realize it or not, your vision, or your lack of it, governs not only your decisions but also the way you observe others, how you read their body language, how you process their energy, how you assess their honesty, their confidence, their intent. Vision is the difference between a person watching a conversation unfold and a person steering it without saying a word, because once you are clear on what you are building, you stop being distracted by meaningless signals, you stop being pulled in 5 different directions by every raised eyebrow, every sideways glance, every breath of hesitation that others might interpret as rejection or insult or confrontation, because the one with vision sees it all through the lens of destination, not distraction, and that is what separates those who react to body language from those who command it. To understand what someone's body is telling you, you must first be anchored in the truth of where you are going, because when you lack direction, every interaction becomes confusing, every contradiction in someone's tone or posture feels like a threat or a challenge, but when your vision is strong, these same cues become nothing more than data, information to guide your next move, not determine your value, and that internal stability, that clarity of long-term direction, gives you the freedom to remain calm when others fidget, to remain still when others escalate, to remain focused even as the people around you spiral in a storm of mixed signals and emotional noise. This is how Walt Disney operated, not by analyzing the present through the lens of convenience, but by seeing everything and everyone through the lens of what could be, and that vision allowed him to extract meaning from silence, to recognize hidden talent in unrefined gestures, to read doubt not as opposition but as raw material to be sculpted into belief. And when you apply that same principle to body language, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see not only what people are showing you but why they are showing it, and even more than that, you begin to see what's missing, what they wish they could express but don't have the strength or clarity or courage to reveal, and that is where the decoder transforms into a leader. Because vision doesn't just sharpen your ability to read others, it transforms your ability to create context, to direct the emotional gravity of a room, to anticipate needs and tensions and opportunities long before they are made explicit. And the irony is, most people don't even realize how much they are broadcasting their lack of vision until they are in front of someone who has one. Because a person with vision is grounded, calm, decisive, hard to impress, and even harder to rattle, and in their presence, you begin to feel your own uncertainty exposed. Not because they called it out, but because they didn't have to. Vision allows you to read people from a distance, not in terms of feet or meters, but in terms of awareness, in terms of depth, because you begin to recognize patterns in behavior that signal direction. The eyes that scan the room too often signal someone still looking for purpose. The arms that constantly shift between open and closed signal unresolved inner conflict. The foot that points toward the door while the body faces forward signals a split between what they're saying and what they're truly committed to, and unless you have a vision guiding your own actions, your brain will misinterpret these signals, personalize them, take offense, or react impulsively. But when you're operating from vision, you don't chase validation, you collect alignment, and that's how you use body language strategically, not manipulatively. You notice who leans in when you speak about purpose, who crosses their arms when you talk about responsibility, who mirrors your posture unconsciously, because these signs, these seemingly small movements, are not accidents. They are fragments of a deeper truth trying to rise to the surface, and only the person with vision can piece them together into a cohesive understanding. And let's be clear, vision is not fantasy, it is not vague ambition dressed up as destiny, it is engineered reality, built on intention, built on choice, built on painful self-awareness, and when you cultivate that kind of vision, your ability to decode others becomes more than observational. It becomes transformational, because now, instead of simply interpreting behavior, You begin to influence it, not through force, but through presence, through coherence, through the gravitational pull of someone who knows exactly where they're going. This is what made Edison, Ford, Lincoln, and Carnegie not just inventors or industrialists or presidents, but shapers of perception, because people didn't just follow their words, they aligned with their vision, and that vision was so strong that it colored every move, every conversation, every moment of resistance, and gave them the ability to hold presence when others folded, to interpret silence not as emptiness but as space pregnant with potential. So now you must ask yourself, not just, can I read body language? But what vision is guiding me when I read it? Because without a higher goal, you will misread the moment, you will take personally what is simply fear, you will react where you should pause, and you will collapse under the weight of misinterpretation, not because people were dishonest, but because you lacked the clarity to see them correctly. Vision turns confusion into context, turns contradiction into curiosity, turns resistance into redirection, and if you want to step into the highest levels of awareness, if you want to not just read others but guide them, connect with them, build with them, you must first anchor yourself in a vision larger than the moment, larger than the room, larger than your own ego. That is when body language becomes something more than a tool. It becomes a channel for truth, a mirror of intention, a field of insight that no longer overwhelms you, but reveals what matters most, and that is when you stop merely observing the world and begin actively shaping it. Chapter 6. Purpose. The pulse beneath every gesture. Every movement, every glance, every hesitation in someone's body is a symptom of something deeper, and if you trace the behavior far enough down into the psychological roots, you will almost always find this. Either they are acting with purpose, or they are acting in the absence of it, and that distinction, more than training, more than education, more than confidence, is what determines not only how someone behaves, but how much of that behavior is authentic, how much is calculated, how much is confused, and how much is involuntarily leaking out in ways they don't even realize. The truth about human communication is that most people aren't choosing their behavior, they're drifting into it, driven by forces they haven't named and values they haven't clarified, and if you, as an observer, try to decode body language without understanding the presence, or the vacuum of purpose in the person you're watching, you will only see fragments of truth, and fragments without context are misleading. Purpose is not something people say, they radiate it, and it is evident in the economy of their movement, in the precision of their posture, in the way they occupy space not out of arrogance but out of certainty, and once you've seen it in action, you will recognize its absence like a void in the atmosphere. Watch the difference between a leader who walks into a room with intention versus someone looking to be liked. The leader moves less, but every movement carries weight. Their gaze is deliberate, not darting. Their breath is paced, not rushed. Their shoulders do not shrink under pressure. They settle, because the body always mirrors the clarity, or confusion, of the inner mission. This is the layer of body language that most people never access, because they are too focused on decoding what someone is doing instead of why they are doing it, but the master decoder always traces the signal back to its source, and that source is purpose, and if you know how to sense that, if you know how to distinguish performance from conviction, enthusiasm from desperation, charm from grounded intent, you suddenly begin to understand not just how people act, but who they are becoming. That is what Lincoln understood when he debated, what Carnegie understood when he negotiated, what Disney understood when he pitched the impossible. None of them were simply interpreting people's words or actions. They were feeling the frequency of the person's deeper motives, and they knew that beneath every smirk, every stammer, every boast, and every silence, there was either a presence of purpose or a fear of lacking one. And when you learn to read people at that level, you stop overvaluing the visible signs and start tuning into something far more accurate, the intention that drives the action. This is also why your own purpose determines your ability to decode others with precision, because if you're walking into every interaction simply trying to prove yourself, or win approval, or avoid rejection, then your perception will always be distorted, because your nervous system is too busy protecting you to actually see clearly, and that makes you vulnerable to misreading people, interpreting confidence as arrogance, disagreement as hostility, neutrality as disinterest, when in truth, none of those things are real. They're just your unanchored self projecting insecurity onto someone else's behavior. But when you carry a clear and unshakable purpose, not a slogan, not a mantra, but a lived, integrated sense of direction, your body becomes aligned, your mind becomes calm, and your observations become sharp. You're no longer triggered by resistance. You're not thrown off by contradiction. You see postures and patterns and tone and energy for what they are, not for what your emotional reflexes want them to be. That's why purpose must come before technique, before analysis, before the pursuit of psychological tactics. Because without purpose, knowledge becomes manipulation, but with purpose, knowledge becomes precision. Now consider this. When you walk into a room with purpose, other people's bodies begin to respond to you differently, even if they don't understand why. The nervous glances become steadier. The defensive postures loosen. People begin to mirror you not because you demanded it, but because your centered energy created a gravitational pull, and whether they are aware of it or not, their bodies begin to shift in accordance with yours, and that is where true influence begins, not in dominance, not in noise, but in alignment created through intentional being. This is not something you can fake, and that's what makes it powerful. Anyone can memorize body language tips. Anyone can learn what crossed arms or shifting weight might suggest. But to command presence, to walk into a space and read its emotional temperature instantly, you must become someone whose very breath is driven by purpose, because that is the only thing that gives you the stillness to watch without judgment, the focus to interpret without distortion, and the patience to respond with precision. The best decoders of human behavior are not always the most educated, they are the most embodied. And embodiment begins with a decision to stand for something, to live and act and speak from a place of principle rather than performance. That is how you begin to feel what's behind the words, how you intuit when someone's flattery is driven by agenda, when someone's confidence is masking insecurity, when someone's laughter is just a barrier between them and the truth they're afraid to say. You feel it not because you're guessing, but because your own system is so calm, so grounded in what matters, that you have the bandwidth to observe all the microsignals others miss. And that level of mastery only comes when your life is aligned with something greater than impression management, when you no longer fear losing approval because your aim is not applause, it is impact. Your intention is not to be liked, it is to be effective, and your movement through the world is not about fitting in, it is about changing the quality of every interaction by bringing more clarity, truth, and direction to it. So if you want to sharpen your understanding of others, start by anchoring yourself in a purpose that burns away distraction, that makes you immune to manipulation, that protects your observation from emotional hijacking, and then you will start to notice things you never saw before. The hesitation behind someone's compliments, the fatigue behind someone's cheerfulness, the discomfort hidden beneath someone's confidence. And once you start seeing people like this, you cannot go back to surface level interaction because you will have tasted the real depth of human behavior, and that depth will demand more of you. It will demand vision, discipline, presence, and above all, purpose. Chapter 7. Discipline, the silent sculptor of presence. There is a kind of presence that cannot be borrowed, cannot be mimicked, cannot be fabricated through words or strategy or sheer desire, because it is not built in public, but in private, shaped slowly and relentlessly by an invisible force called discipline, a force that most people underestimate because they confuse effort with intention and movement with mastery, never realizing that every subtle act of self-regulation, every moment of stillness under pressure, every decision to pause instead of react, to observe instead of interrupt, to interpret instead of assume, is the result not of natural talent, but of daily self-governance, and without it, your ability to read body language, to decode behavior, to influence others without words, will always be limited. Discipline is not about punishment, it is about precision, about training your perception to stay focused when distraction is tempting, training your breath to stay deep when anxiety tries to rise, training your emotional reactions to remain silent until after your awareness has spoken, because mastery of body language is not about knowing what a gesture means in isolation. It is about the state of mind you're in when you witness it, and discipline is what ensures that your state of mind is stable, alert, present, and untouched by the noise of your ego or the static of your past. It's easy to believe that the ability to read others comes from a gift, from some rare psychological insight, but the truth is more grounded and far more powerful. It comes from practice, from refining the habits of attention, from paying close and consistent attention to the world around you when no one's watching, from watching how people move when they think they're alone, how their shoulders drop when they stop performing, how their face softens when they're not trying to be impressive, how their true body emerges in the cracks between the social masks, and to see that, not once, but always, you need a discipline of observation that is cold, clean, and utterly consistent. When Carnegie negotiated deals that others thought impossible, it wasn't because he was the loudest man in the room, it was because he had trained himself to sit still longer than others could stand their own silence, because he understood something most people never learn, that if you wait long enough, the truth always comes to the surface, but only if you are disciplined enough to let it emerge on its own, not forced, not provoked, but witnessed. And this witnessing, this level of awareness, is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is built in the grind of repetition, in the willingness to observe hundreds of conversations that don't go your way, to analyze dozens of body language cues that don't confirm your assumptions, to endure the tension of not knowing until clarity reveals itself, not because you guessed, but because you stayed long enough to see. Discipline is what allows you to track a person's story not just through their words, but through the way their eyes shift when speaking about the past, the way their spine subtly contracts when they talk about someone they fear, the way their hands suddenly become still when they enter territory that makes them feel exposed, and none of this becomes visible to the casual observer, because the casual observer is too busy chasing meaning, while the disciplined one is holding space for it to. This is also why your own body language can't be mastered by mimicry, it must be forged by self-discipline, because your body tells the truth of how you treat yourself in the hours when no one is watching. If you've trained yourself to sit in discomfort without fidgeting, your stillness will feel natural. If you've practiced making eye contact with your own truth in the mirror, your gaze will hold steadiness under pressure. If you've disciplined your speech to reflect clarity, not noise, your words will move people not because of volume, but because of weight, and that weight only comes from inner alignment earned over time. Discipline also gives you the ability to remain congruent when others are incongruent, because most people's bodies are in constant contradiction with their words, and without discipline, you will be tempted to either call them out in ego or ignore the signal in fear. But with discipline, you learn to read the incongruence without reacting, to file the information without emotional investment, to use it later when needed, and that ability to delay your response, to withhold judgment, to operate on a timeline defined by strategy rather than instinct, is one of the highest forms of psychological power you can develop. The body speaks most clearly in times of pressure, and if you have not disciplined yourself to be still in those moments, to remain observant when your emotions are screaming for release, then you will lose the signal at the very moment it matters most. And this is why discipline is not a punishment. It is a gift you give to your future self, so that when you're in the heat of confrontation, the chaos of uncertainty, the pull of manipulation, you don't become reactive or scattered or impulsive, you become precise. You become the person in the room who doesn't flinch when someone raises their voice. You become the one who sees the trembling hand under the desk while everyone else is focused on the presentation. You become the one who notices that the real message wasn't in the answer, but in the pause before the answer, in the breath held a second too long, in the half-second delay that revealed hesitation where there should have been certainty. And you don't just notice it, you understand it and you know what to do with it. Because you've trained for this. You've disciplined yourself for this. This is what makes you dangerous, not in a threatening way, but in a way that people respect instinctively, because you radiate a calm they can't manufacture, you read situations they don't even know they're telegraphing, and your silence feels heavier than their speeches, not because you're passive, but because your discipline has given you control over your presence, and presence is the invisible force that changes the behavior of others without them realizing why they're changing. So if you want to master the reading of others, begin by mastering yourself. Master your impulses, your reactions, your posture, your breath, your tone, and then discipline your attention so it becomes unshakable, so that even in the most emotionally charged moment, you don't look away, you don't fill the silence with nervous words, you don't retreat, you observe, and in that observation, you collect more power, more data, more clarity than 100 people trying to speak at once. This is not theory. This is practice. Daily, deliberate, non-negotiable. Discipline is what turns the ordinary mind into an instrument of intuition. Discipline is what turns the average presence into something that alters the atmosphere of every room. Discipline is what lets you read what others try to hide, and keep your own truth untouchable. That is the silent sculptor of real power. That is what makes your perception sharp, your body congruent, your words necessary. That is the unseen edge of all great communicators and all true decoders of human behavior. Chapter 8. Action. The translator between intention and reality. At some point, awareness must evolve into motion, because insight without application is paralysis disguised as progress, and too many people live in that illusion, collecting knowledge, decoding signs, observing behavior, dissecting signals, becoming intellectually aware of patterns without ever crossing the threshold into deliberate action, and they don't realize that mastery of body language, true mastery, not theory, not talk, not performance, is not measured by what you notice, but by what you do with what you see, because until you turn your perception into movement, until you act on your understanding, all your awareness is nothing but internal noise. Action is the great translator between thought and transformation. It is what bridges the signal you receive from someone's posture, tone, or gaze, and the influence you can have on that moment. Because while others are still trying to figure out what a subtle gesture meant, the one who is trained in execution has already adjusted the conversation, shifted the energy, asked the question that cracked the mask, paused long enough to let discomfort reveal truth, leaned in or pulled back with intention. And those micro-actions, when made with precision and speed, become the true power of the decoder, not because you interpret better than others, but because you move on truth faster than others even see it. This is why action is inseparable from mastery, because without it, you remain an observer of life, not a shaper of it. It doesn't matter how many cues you can recognize, how many psychological models you've memorized, or how many subtle expressions you can explain. If you don't act when the moment demands it, if you hesitate when the body shows vulnerability, if you retreat when the room goes silent, if you second-guess the instinct you spent years cultivating, then your knowledge remains trapped behind the wall of your own inaction, and no one will ever feel your presence the way it was meant to be felt. The reason action matters so deeply in this context is because human behavior is not static. It reacts, and it reacts not just to words, but to movement, to timing, to energy, to the subtleties of how you hold your frame in the moment of tension, and when you act, especially when you act in small, precise, well-timed ways, you begin to guide the flow of behavior around you. The greatest communicators in history were not simply articulate, they were tactical, they acted with precision, adjusted posture, inflection, silence, gaze, all in real time, and they understood that behavior is not just to be decoded, it is to be navigated, and navigation requires motion. Look at the lives of those who moved the world. Edison didn't sit in reflection forever. He tested, he failed forward 1,000 times because he knew that progress isn't built by knowing what should work, it's built by doing what reveals what works. Lincoln didn't wait until the country was ready. He stepped forward when the signals said, not yet, because action based on vision is often contrary to consensus. Ford didn't ask permission. He read what people didn't say and acted as if they had. Carnegie didn't just read men, he responded to them, shifted them, acted into their behavior, not after it. This is what separates the trained from the merely informed. The trained mind does not wait for clarity to be perfect. It moves when clarity is sufficient. It acts when timing is critical, even if the outcome isn't guaranteed, because it understands that action creates more signal. Every movement you make produces a ripple of response, a new signal to read, a new layer of truth to interpret, and in that feedback loop, you become not just the observer, but the conductor of interaction. You begin to realize that every time someone fidgets, it's not just a signal to analyze, it might be the moment to pause and let them speak. When someone avoids your eye, it's not just insecurity, it might be the moment to ask the question that breaks the silence. When someone mirrors you, it's not just rapport, it might be the time to push deeper, to challenge, to invite more honesty. And these choices, these micro-actions, are what create the environment where truth is either revealed or buried. This is why action must be trained, not improvised. Because in high-stakes moments, negotiations, leadership, relationships, tension, crisis, the luxury of long contemplation vanishes, and your body will move before your mind has time to explain, which means that your default actions must be forged in discipline, not left to chance. The best decoders are not reactive, they are preemptively decisive, and their actions are simple but surgical, subtle but seismic, because they've drilled the basics so deeply that intuition becomes execution. And here's where most fail: they overthink. They second-guess what they see. They doubt their perception. And in that moment of hesitation, the signal is lost, the energy shifts, the truth recoils, and the chance for influence dissolves. You cannot hesitate in this domain. You must act, not recklessly, but precisely. Not to control, but to reveal. Because your action is not just a response to behavior, it is a mirror that reflects, a magnet that draws out, a tool that reshapes the dynamic in real time. So when someone shows you their tension, what do? When someone leans back subtly after a bold statement, do you challenge or wait? When someone flashes a half-second look of uncertainty after a confident pitch, do you dig deeper or let it pass? These are the moments where the observer becomes the influencer, and that transition only happens through action backed by awareness. And let us not forget, your own body language is always an action, whether you are aware of it or not. Your stillness is an action. Your eye contact is an action. Your silence is an action. Your decision to fold your arms, lean in, smile half-heartedly, or raise your chin, all of it is being interpreted in real time by those around you. So if your body is not aligned with intention, it will leak uncertainty, and people will feel it, whether they can explain it or not. This is why your greatest tool of influence is not clever words. It is aligned action, the kind that moves with meaning, not habit. To master the reading of others is to become a more effective reader of moments. But to shape moments, to create direction, to inspire change, to unlock what someone is hiding from themselves, that takes movement. That takes a willingness to step in when others step back. It takes courage to act before approval is granted. And it takes commitment to continue acting even when the results are invisible, because you know that leadership is not reactive, it is formative. So train yourself not just to watch, but to move. Train your nervous system not just to perceive, but to respond with clarity. Train your presence not just to interpret the world, but to shape it. One calibrated gesture, one purposeful shift, one decisive silence at a time. Because without action, your perception dies in the cage of thought. But with action, it becomes impact, the kind people remember, even if they don't know why. Chapter 9. Gratitude, the anchor that grounds perception in reality. In a world obsessed with gaining more insight, more power, more advantage, more control, we forget that the greatest clarity in decoding others, the truest presence in reading human behavior, doesn't always come from accumulation or ambition, but from something radically underestimated: gratitude, not as a performance, not as a cliché, not as a polite word tossed around when things go well, but as a core state of being that anchors your mind in the present, strips away fear, and stabilizes your perception so that you are no longer interpreting people through the lens of scarcity, suspicion, or urgency, but through an internal abundance that lets you observe without the distortion of needing something from them. Because if you are constantly analyzing people from a place of lack, if you're always trying to prove your worth, to win their approval, to gain the upper hand, then your perception is polluted before you even open your eyes. You're not reading them clearly, you're projecting your own needs into the space between their words and gestures. And that gap, if not filled with stillness and presence, will always be filled with bias. Gratitude, then, is not a feel-good idea. It is a cognitive weapon. It's the internal state that gives you enough distance from your ego to witness behavior as it is, not as you hope it is or fear it might be. It's not gratitude for what's comfortable. It's not gratitude for the perfect moment. It's gratitude for awareness itself, for the privilege of seeing more deeply into the world than most people ever will. And when you move through life with that kind of rooted thankfulness, not performative but practiced, your nervous system settles, your attention sharpens, and your presence no longer demands a reaction from others. It simply invites authenticity, because people can feel when they are being watched with curiosity instead of judgment, and that difference, subtle, often unspoken, is what allows someone's real self to emerge in front of you without armor. Gratitude trains you to notice the small cues, the microsignals, the body language that reveals everything. Because when you're not rushing to get something out of a moment, you're finally able to see the moment for what it is. You begin to recognize the elegance in the way someone breaks eye contact, not as a weakness, but as a sign of internal conflict they don't yet know how to express. You start to understand that folded arms aren't always resistance, they're protection. That silence isn't always evasion, it's sometimes fear wrapped in dignity. And only a mind grounded in deep, non-attached gratitude can see those differences without twisting them into personal interpretations. Look at the masters of influence, those who shaped history not just through what they said, but through how they understood people. They were not driven by bitterness. They were not obsessed with validation. They were grateful for the human experience in all its forms, and that gave them the internal margin to be slow, thoughtful, accurate, and above all, calm under pressure. Lincoln, facing unimaginable division and scrutiny, grounded his thinking not in vengeance or fear but in a deep reverence for the human soul and its contradictions. That reverence, that space within, was not weakness. It was precision born from humility. And that is what gratitude really is, humility in motion. Gratitude keeps your interpretations clean. It keeps your presence heavy. It keeps you from overreaching, from assuming, from trying to squeeze meaning from moments that weren't meant to produce anything other than observation. When you are grateful for the interaction itself, not just for what you can extract from it, you give others the space to relax, and in that relaxation, their true body language emerges. That's when you see the real signal. That's when the performance ends and the truth walks in. Because no one reveals themselves to someone who feels entitled to their truth. But people open to someone who's thankful just to be present with them. And let's be honest, if your perception is built on stress, on scarcity, on entitlement, then your ability to decode will always be compromised, because you're not decoding, you're hunting. And when you're hunting, you miss the nuance. You overlook the subtle pull in someone's voice when they lie to themselves. You miss the subtle shift in breath when they say something they don't believe. You overlook the twitch in the mouth that reveals regret before the brain finishes the sentence. But when you are centered in quiet, unforced gratitude, you hear it all, not because you're trying harder, but because you've stopped needing it to be anything other than what it is. That's the paradox. When you no longer demand truth, people offer it. When you no longer chase energy, you become the one who stabilizes it. And that shift, moving from extractor to presence, is the shift gratitude enables. Not a ritual, not a journal entry, but a living mindset that says, I do not need to dominate this moment. I only need to witness it with full awareness. And that mindset changes the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you move. Because now, your calm is not a tactic, it's your default. And your perception becomes not a weapon, but a mirror. And here's the part no one tells you. Gratitude not only enhances your ability to read others, it protects you from your own distortions. Because there will be moments when the body language you're reading hits something inside of you. A wound, a memory, a fear. And in those moments, the temptation to react, to misread, to lash out or withdraw will be almost automatic. But if you are grounded in gratitude for the experience, you don't collapse. You stay rooted. You stay aware. And from that awareness, you make better choices. You hold presence when others expect reaction. You speak less but say more. You wait longer but respond better. Gratitude becomes your stabilizer, your compass, the internal mechanism that prevents your emotional debris from spilling into your perception. It is not weakness. It is not softness. It is the strongest force available to the master of awareness, because it makes you immune to the chaos around you without making you cold. It keeps your mind open without making you naive. It sharpens your attention without making you aggressive. And in a world that rewards cleverness but forgets presence, gratitude makes you unforgettable, not because you perform, but because you see. So if you want to become more than someone who knows what body language means, if you want to become someone who sees others before they speak, who hears the message beneath the noise, who connects on levels that defy explanation, then gratitude must not be an afterthought. It must be a foundation. Not spoken. Not for them. For you. Because once you move through the world from that place, your very awareness becomes a gift, not just to you, but to everyone around you. Chapter 10. Adaptability, the art of bending without breaking. If there's one truth that shatters every rigid structure of behavior, every scripted interaction, every assumption we carry about people, it is this: nothing stays the same, not in the body, not in the mind, not in the energy of a conversation. And if you want to become a master of decoding human behavior, a master of reading what others don't say but can't help but show, then you must become fluid, because the human being in front of you is not a statue frozen in one emotion, one story, one position. They are a river in motion, and unless you can move with them, moment to moment, breath to breath, adjusting your awareness without losing your center, you will fall into the same trap that ruins most communication: interpreting a dynamic situation with a static mindset. Adaptability is not about agreeing with everyone or conforming to every room. It's about maintaining your clarity while adjusting your approach, about keeping your purpose intact while shifting your strategy. And when it comes to reading body language, this becomes critical, because people change fast. They walk in nervous, they warm up, they pull back, they open slightly, they test the space, they adapt to your energy. And if you're still stuck on who they were 5 minutes ago, you're not reading them anymore. You're reading a ghost, a previous version of them that no longer exists, and in doing so, you're making decisions based on something that's already gone. This is where most people fail, not because they don't know the theory, but because they try to freeze-frame reality into something digestible, something certain, something permanent. But the human body doesn't work like that. It evolves in real time, and your awareness must evolve with it, or you'll always be one step behind the truth, misreading a relaxed gesture as disinterest, interpreting a moment of withdrawal as rejection when it was just recalibration, assuming that defensiveness means deception when it might just be fatigue from years of not being understood. To adapt is to listen deeper than you've been taught to listen, to stay open even when the signal changes, to update your conclusions as the context shifts, because the person you're reading is not just expressing who they are expressing who they are becoming in your presence, and that distinction changes everything. You are not just a witness to their behavior, you are a variable in it, and if your presence is rigid, if your mindset is locked in, if your analysis is fixed from the start, you become blind to the transformation you are actively participating in. Adaptability, then, is not weakness, it is strategic intelligence. It is the mark of someone who understands that to read people is to read timing, to read emotional weather, to read not just the gesture but the phase that gesture lives inside of. Think of negotiation. If you push too hard too soon, you lose them. If you wait too long, the window closes. Think of intimacy. If you interpret hesitation as rejection, you shut the door on a connection that was still forming. Think of leadership. If you expect people to stay in the same state from beginning to end, you're leading the past, not the present. And this is why true adaptability begins not in reaction, but in preparation. You train yourself to stay emotionally mobile, not fragile but flexible, so that when the signal changes, you don't panic, you don't cling to the original script. You shift without losing who you are. You modulate your energy. You change your tone. You adjust your proximity. You give more space or less. You accelerate or decelerate the pace of your message. Not because you're trying to manipulate, but because you understand that real understanding happens only when you and the other person are in sync, and sync doesn't come from stubbornness. It comes from sensitivity backed by composure. You watch their body shift and you don't resist it, you track it. You sense their tension rising and instead of matching it, you neutralize it with your calm. You see their eyes dart and instead of assuming guilt, you sense uncertainty and ask a better question. You feel their openness peak and you know that is the moment to deliver truth, not before, not after. And to hit that moment, that timing, you must be adaptable not just in action, but in awareness. You must train your intuition to scan not for correctness, but for context. What fits now, not just what is right in theory. That's what made the legends so powerful. Edison didn't keep selling the same dream in the same way to the same ears. He adapted the way he told the story based on who was listening. Carnegie wasn't trying to bulldoze people with logic. He adapted his presence to the tempo of the room, sensing when to lead with strength and when to lead with empathy. Disney didn't pitch every idea with the same tone. He adjusted his energy to the mood of the conversation, knowing that creativity isn't just about ideas, it's about reading emotional openness and acting when the door is cracked, not when it's slammed shut. Adaptability also means knowing when your own body is sending the wrong signal and correcting it in real time, when you're becoming too intense and need to ease your posture, when your voice is becoming too sharp and needs to soften, when your eye contact is holding too long and needs to back off so the other person can breathe again. Because your body, too, is part of the conversation, and just as you read others, they are reading you. So if you're not adapting, you're miscommunicating without saying a word. Let go of the idea that mastery is rigidity. Mastery is mobility with accuracy. It is the ability to stay fluid without losing clarity. It is the ability to pivot without abandoning principle. It is the art of moving through people's defenses not by breaking them down, but by moving around them, adjusting your posture, your timing, your tone until their resistance dissolves not through confrontation, but through resonance. That is how the best decoders win, not by force, but by flow. So train yourself to move like water in conversation. Adjust without apologizing. Shift without losing center. Change course without changing who you are. Because the world does not pause for your analysis. It moves. And the person who adapts fastest, with the most presence and the least ego, will always hold the greatest power in the room. Not because they're the loudest or the smartest, but because they're the most attuned to the present moment, and nothing beats someone who is fully alive to what's actually happening right now. Chapter 11. Resilience, the unshakable core behind the observing eye. There will come a moment, whether in a negotiation, a confrontation, a relationship, or a split-second decision, when the signals you are decoding will not flatter you, when the cues will not bend in your favor, when the gestures you observe will contradict what you want to believe, and in that moment, the difference between someone who merely understands body language and someone who masters it is not found in knowledge or skill or even timing. It is found in resilience, in your capacity to remain psychologically upright while the reality in front of you refuses to conform to your preference, because this discipline is not about control, it is about composure under pressure, and without that, your observation will fracture under the weight of your emotional need to be right, to be liked, to be safe. Resilience is not toughness. It is not aggression. It is not the brute force ability to endure conflict. Resilience is quiet structural integrity. It is the internal architecture that allows you to stay fully present in emotionally uncomfortable moments without fleeing into defensiveness, without overcorrecting to reclaim dominance, without doubting what you know simply because what you're seeing makes you feel exposed or disappointed. It is the difference between noticing someone's micro-expression of contempt and staying grounded, instead of reacting with ego or collapsing into self-doubt. Because the real test of perception is not whether you can read people when you feel empowered, it's whether you can still see clearly when the room turns against you. And the truth is, most people, even the ones who have read the books, taken the courses, memorized the cues, fall apart when what they observe challenges their sense of identity. They see the eye roll, the sigh, the crossed arms, the subtle withdrawal of attention, and instead of registering it objectively, they personalize it. They make it a referendum on their value. And the moment you do that, the moment your observation becomes emotional evidence for your insecurity, you are no longer reading anyone else. You're reading your own wounds projected into their behavior. This is where resilience becomes your greatest ally, because it allows you to separate signal from story. It gives you the strength to see someone's disapproval and not make it mean anything about who you are. It gives you the stillness to sit in front of someone who is angry or cold or manipulative and observe them like a scientist, not engage them like a rival. It lets you process rejection without distortion. And more importantly, it allows you to keep listening when most people would start defending themselves, because that's the true moment of mastery, when everyone else gets emotional and you get sharper. Lincoln embodied this when he walked into rooms filled with people who despised him, not with bravado or apology, but with a depth of internal calm that came not from confidence alone, but from resilience forged in failure, in rejection, in solitude, in pain, and that gave him the clarity to read people not through the fog of his own ego, but through the light of his enduring mission. Ford, criticized relentlessly, didn't react to every skeptical glance. He absorbed them, because resilience doesn't mean you never feel pressure, it means pressure doesn't own your perception. And Edison, whose every attempt could have been seen as another reason to quit, understood something deeper, that emotional stability is the true gatekeeper of clarity, and if you lose your resilience, you lose your ability to trust what you see. Because let's face it, when you're emotionally shaken, your reading becomes reactive. You start seeing rejection where there is none. You interpret hesitation as insult. You confuse feedback with threat. Your body begins leaking insecurity, your voice becomes sharp, your shoulders tighten, your timing loses rhythm, and people sense the shift even if they can't name it. And in that moment, everything you had, the observation, the rapport, the understanding, begins to erode. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. Because your resilience wasn't ready for the signal that challenged your comfort. So resilience must be trained. Not just hoped for. Not just admired in others. Trained, through voluntary discomfort, through moments of deliberate stillness in the face of judgment, through honest examination of your own fragility. It must be built through conscious exposure to the signals that shake you the most, until they lose their power over your perception. Because only then will you be able to walk into any room, sit with any emotion, decode any contradiction, and stay clear, stay calm, stay credible. And here's the secret. When people feel your resilience, they relax. They feel safer. They become more truthful. Because deep down, every human being is testing the people around them. Can you handle my truth? Can you see my flaws and not flinch? Can you read my resistance and not recoil? And if your presence says yes, if your body language radiates unshakable internal strength, they will show you more than they've shown anyone else, not because you pried it out of them, but because your resilience created emotional permission. That is the hidden power of this principle. When your awareness is anchored in resilience, your presence becomes the kind of force people want to open up to. You stop chasing the truth, and the truth finds you. You stop needing people to behave a certain way, and they start behaving more authentically. You stop reading only surface behavior, and start reading the entire field of energy beneath it. So ask yourself, what shakes your focus? What signals from others trigger your self-doubt? What kind of body language makes you shrink, get louder, shut down, overcompensate? And then go to work, not on them, but on you. Because the person who can see clearly under pressure is the one who will rise while others lose the thread. The one who can interpret contradiction without losing trust. The one who can stand still while others unravel. That is not charisma. That is not genius. That is resilience in action. And it is what will carry your ability to read people from educated guesswork to a place of real power, real transformation, and real leadership, not because you control others, but because you can't be thrown off by them. Chapter 12. Learning, the endless edge of human mastery. The moment you believe you've mastered how to read people, the moment you begin to trust your intuition without question, to rely on your perceptions without re-examination, to speak with confidence that's no longer checked by reflection, is the exact moment your mastery begins to erode, because this path, this ability to see beneath behavior and behind the mask, is not a destination you arrive at, it is a discipline you return to again and again, like a sharpened blade that dulls in silence and must be honed not by arrogance, but by endless learning, because the mind that stops evolving becomes blind not all at once, but slowly, subtly, and without warning. And here lies the great irony. The more skilled you become at decoding body language, the more you realize how little is truly static, how fragile assumptions are, how dangerous certainty becomes when it's no longer questioned, because every person you meet is a living equation. Context, culture, trauma, story, upbringing, language, insecurity, intent, and none of it can be captured by a rulebook or chart or list of gestures. The smile that means joy in one body may mean panic in another. The silence that means reflection to one person might mean rage to someone else. And unless your mind is flexible enough to stay curious, you will inevitably begin to see the world not as it is, but as your experience has shaped it to be, which is just another form of blindness wrapped in the illusion of expertise. Learning, then, is not a task you check off, it's a posture you live inside. It means you walk into every room aware of your blind spots, ready to question your assumptions, willing to adjust even your most trusted interpretations, because the cost of being wrong is not humiliation, it's missed connection, misread truth, misunderstood intention. And the truly powerful are not the ones who need to be right, they are the ones who are ready to update what they believe in real time, based on better evidence, clearer data, and deeper understanding. They do not confuse knowledge with wisdom. They do not mistake certainty for leadership. They remain students of reality even when others begin calling them masters. This is what separates the performative communicator from the grounded one. The grounded mind never stops studying. They don't read one book, they read situations. They don't just listen for cues, they watch patterns. They don't memorize gestures, they ask better questions. What changed? What context have I missed? What in me might be distorting what I'm seeing in them? And that kind of internal dialogue, that constant audit of perception, is what keeps the edge sharp, the intuition clean, and the influence real. To learn at this level is not about collecting more facts. It's about deepening your awareness of nuance. Because real understanding lives in nuance. It lives in the way someone breathes when they think no one is paying attention. It lives in the 300 milliseconds between a question and the first word of an answer. It lives in the twitch at the corner of someone's mouth, the way their feet shift under the table, the micro-expression that flashes and vanishes like a secret too dangerous to say aloud. And if your attention is dulled by overconfidence, or worn down by complacency, you won't just miss these moments, you'll misinterpret them. And that kind of error doesn't just make you less effective, it makes you dangerous, because your false certainty will lead others astray, and worse, you won't even know it. That's why every real master remains a learner. They review. They rewatch. They replay conversations in their mind. They sit in silence afterward and ask themselves what they missed, what the other person might have been trying to say but didn't, what their own body might have been signaling unintentionally. Because they understand that every interaction is data, every word is context, every reaction is a window, and if you learn from every moment, no moment is wasted, even the awkward ones, even the failures, even the moments when you misread something so completely that it hurts, especially those moments, because they become the edge that cuts away your illusion and leaves only what is real. And learning also means letting go. Letting go of old interpretations that once served you but now limit you. Letting go of the stories you've told yourself about what certain behaviors mean, especially when those stories are rooted in your own unresolved pain. It means letting go of the desire to always be right, to always be ahead, to always be the one who knows. Because the person who always has the answer is rarely the one who hears the whole truth. And in this craft, in this discipline of human decoding, truth is never handed to you. It is revealed slowly over time, only to those willing to watch longer, listen deeper, and question harder. So yes, study the science. Know the signals. Learn the cues. But never let your understanding become a wall. Let it be a foundation, one you build above, not behind. Let every conversation be a lesson. Let every person be a teacher. Let every failed reading become the training ground for a better one. And let your own evolution be the proof of your commitment, not just to knowledge, but to wisdom earned through humility. Because the greatest power in the world is not to read others perfectly, it is to keep learning how to see them more clearly every single day. It is to refine your instincts without ever letting them fossilize. It is to walk into every room knowing that your presence will shape the energy, but also that the energy will teach you something if you're willing to stay open. And that openness, that state of being fully awake, fully present, fully alive to what people are actually communicating with their bodies, their tone, their eyes, their hesitation, that is what sets you apart. That is what creates resonance where others create resistance. That is what builds trust where others build tension. That is what moves conversations toward truth instead of toward performance. So remember this, the journey never ends. There is no finish line to awareness. No diploma for presence. No graduation from empathy. Only a deeper and deeper clarity, earned through observation, expanded by curiosity, reinforced by humility, and sharpened by time. Because the human body is not a code to crack. It is a story being told. And your job is not to solve it. Your job is to listen with everything you have. To watch with your entire being. To respond with grace, precision, and integrity. And above all, to keep learning. Boys. Because when you do, they feel it. And when they feel it, they open. And when they open, everything changes. The decoding is never finished. It has only just begun.